great job of what he's doing. But I do feel like people trust you, Dr. Wang. You're from China. You grew up during China's depression. You know what it's like to have the civil liberties encroached upon. And get you out there on the forefront of issues. You're not afraid to speak up. You're not afraid to show your faith. Appreciate that. And one thing that I like about it, it's really interesting, and I just thought about this, is that you're the only one other than Jesus Christ himself who gave sight to the blind. That's something to think about. I mean, so God has blessed your hands. He's blessed your sight to be able to help others have sight. We're talking about, I like your commercial about little Maria from Moldova that was blind and then could see. So I just think as a Christian, I'm just blessed, and I know others that are here with me are blessed to be a friend and appreciate you putting this tonight. I really wish I could. All from the Warren, Vice Mayor Melissa Brown, Calvin Jones from Warren, and Danny Tulsa, we're here at Terminal Security to help host this for us. And Frank Avery just stepped out and come back. And I know I've got a lot of people that said they're going to be watching this. Town manager Murder Brian today said he was going to try several county commissioners, council, as well as Dr. Dean Urban, the dean of the College of Business. Great guy. I hope he was able to attend this meeting. So welcome, Dr. Wang, and also Carl Hudgens, who came highly recommended, the EMS Director of Rutherford County, Chairman Pettis Reed, and Mayor Bill Ketron, both highly recommended Carl Hudgens for being on this call with us and bringing his expertise of 30, 40 years, I guess, Carl. I'm not trying to age you, but thank you for being here. So thank you for being willing to talk about this.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to go ahead and formally introduce Dr. Wang, and then he's going to come on and share with you a little bit about his story. So Dr. Wang is a Harvard and MIT graduate, MD, magna cum laude, and one of the few cataract and LASIK eye surgeons in the world today who holds a doctorate degree in laser physics. Ming grew up during China's Cultural Revolution, during which millions of innocent youth were deported to remote areas to face a life sentence of poverty and hard labor. Ming played the Chinese violin, erhu, and learned to dance in order to escape such a devastating fate. He eventually made his way to America with only $50 and graduated with the highest honors from Harvard and MIT. Dr. Wang founded a 501c3 nonprofit, the Wang Foundation for Sight Restoration, which to date has helped patients from over 40 states in the US and 55 countries, with all sight restoration surgeries performed free of charge. He was named the Kiwanis Nashvilleian of the Year for his lifetime dedication to helping blind orphan children from around the world. And Dr. Wang's autobiography, From Darkness to Sight, has inspired the upcoming movie Sight. Dr. Wang is a co-founder and president of the Tennessee Immigrant and Minority Business Group and co-founder of the Common Ground Network, another of his nonprofits that focuses on his lifelong mission to help people find common ground and solutions to society's problems. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and have Dr. Wang come on to share with you a little bit about his personal story of growing up in China and escaping the Chinese Cultural Revolution, along with COVID-19 and some of those 7 steps that we need to be taking to reopen the country. Dr. Wang, I'm going to have you come on at this time.
Thank you, Alana. Hello, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Representative Sparks. Mike has been my long-term friend. I was counting the years, Mike, and it must be many, many years, probably nearly 20 years I've known Mike, and he has been very supportive to many of the works that are going on in our community. He has been to many meetings of Tennessee Immigrant Minority Business Group, which is the Minority Immigrant Chamber of Commerce. And he has been to many events. I remember one time Mike and I was in one event that one church in the area, Rutherford County, got burned down. And Mike was part of that event, tried to raise money to help people, to help their church. And he invited me as well for that event. So I really has come to admire Mike, not only for his contribution to the community, but also his sense of righteousness. You know, we are in a very difficult situation with COVID-19. That is, while we do want to protect as many lives as possible, especially as a doctor, and every day I'm taking care of patients, many of them have these eye conditions, including eye infection with COVID-19. And today, in the morning, I did some surgery, for example. But at the same time, we have to recognize that this is a free democratic society, that our privacy and our individual rights of citizens is of paramount importance. Over the years that Mike and always has stood firmly in protecting what's the essence of America, which is the freedom. So how can we protect life and also protect our freedom, and economy in this very critical period of time and with the virus? So I'm going to talk about a particular viewpoint I believe will be able to allow us to protect lives, but also protect our jobs, economy. Sometimes it seems that the solution may not be there, so much polarization, but I'm going to suggest something that I think may actually work better for us. And I'm also very honored today to have Carl and Brenda join me and with Mike. So we will have a question and answer session regarding COVID-19, particularly they take advantage of their experience with taking care of the virus in Rutherford County. And Rutherford County has done quite well, with several hundred and very small number of deaths, several hundred infected. So I think it's serving as a model system. Carl was relating to me early that among the EMTs that he has in charge, a large number of them, not a single EMT has been infected, which is amazing achievement. So I have a lot to learn from Carl and Brenda myself as well, how Rutherford County has been able to do that. But as we look at this question, that this polarization, right? Should we open the country? Should we not open the country? Should we protect the lives or should we protect the economy? And what I like to do is approach this question, this polarization, this debate in a higher context, in a higher ground, and step back a little bit, see what is really the issue at hand. On the surface, it may be open our country now, don't open, protect life, protect the economy. It seems to at odds with each other. However, I think the real question behind it, the core question is freedom. And I was relating to Representative Sparks earlier that he was asking me, you used to say about people appreciate freedom and appreciate sight, the analogy. Every day I take care of patients with vision problems, but I come to realize that people who really appreciate freedom are those who used to be blind, or who appreciate sight are used to be blind. So in America, we always have freedom. Sometimes we have taken freedom for granted. That's human nature. But I'm someone who has different experience. I came from a situation where there was no freedom. So just like someone who used to have no sight, now I have sight or have freedom. I appreciate freedom at a bit deeper level. So that's what I'm going to talk about. That's why I'm going to talk about my story a little bit growing up, and also touch upon another polarization today about medicine and moral ethical faith principles. When they clash, what should we do? So I'm going to touch upon, but at the end, I'm going to focus on addressing COVID-19. Can we find a common ground between this dispute, this polarization between protecting lives and protecting jobs? Can we find something that can work for both? And I'm going to show a little PowerPoint slide now about the cover of my autobiography book now. And that's From Darkness to Sight. Actually, if any of you are interested in the book, I would be delighted to sign one and mail to you. And just put in the chat room your name and mailing address. And the money goes to the foundation, $10. Foundation help blind orphan children. With all the doctors, we donate our services. Actually, the book, as you're looking at it, is actually being made into a major motion picture right now. I would like to show you a video about my autobiography, From Darkness to Sight now.
Struggle, difficulty, hardship. What do these words mean? Does everyone face them? Or only those who grow up on the wrong side of the tracks? Is it possible to overcome the painful memories of the past? Do you have to be a product of your own environment? And is change even an option? Psychologists tell us that the first 4 years of your life shapes the rest of your life. Is it true? Is there any hope for a better tomorrow? Or can we break free from the prison of yesterday or step into a brighter and more promising future? Is this merely wishing, hoping for things that may never become a reality? And if it is possible to shatter the haunting voices of the past, then where do you start? Who do you ask? What is the first step? Where do you look for answers? These are all questions that Ming Wang had to ask himself. In fact, many do not realize that as a teenager, Ming had to fight valiantly to actually escape what some call one of history's darkest eras, China's Cultural Revolution. During this time, millions of innocent youth were deported to remote areas to face a life sentence of poverty and hard labor. Now the questions have changed. People are asking by the groves. How did you overcome such a dark past? Where did you draw your courage from? What challenges did you face along the way? Through his own tenacity and his parents' tireless efforts to provide a chance of freedom for their son, Ming eventually made his way to America with $50 in his pocket and an American dream in his heart, where against all odds, he would earn a PhD in laser physics and graduate magna cum laude with the highest honors from Harvard Medical School and MIT. From Darkness to Sight is a story of one man's inspirational journey of turning fear, poverty, persecution, and prejudice into healing and love for others. It demonstrates how focus, determination, humility, and profound faith can inspire a life that, in turn, impacts that of countless others. To order your copy of Dr. Wang's riveting autobiography, From Darkness to Sight, please visit www.fromdarknesstosight.com.
So I'm going to show you a little picture of the Great Wall of China. Next one. China is about the size of the United States. Next one, the Forbidden City. Next picture. This is a photo of my family. I grew up I was born in 1960. And the front row was my mom, dad, younger brother. I was the back. We were very poor. The combined salaries of my parents every month was only $15. And mom and dad always said, study hard, Ming. Education was the only way to get out of poverty. But it was in the family that focused on education, where education was everything, when, next slide, in 1966, disaster occurred. In 1966, the communist dictator decided the best way to keep on dictating is to keep people ignorant. The best way to keep people ignorant is to actually, believe it or not, shut down all universities and colleges of the entire country. Not just for a day or two, for 10 years. And forcefully deported every single high school graduate to the poorest part of the country and condemn each one of us a life sentence of hard labor and poverty in what they call the Cultural Revolution for that 10 years. It's really a cultural holocaust. So over 10 years of Cultural Revolution, they deported 20 million young people for life in the poorest part of the country. Next slide. 1974, I was 14 years old. I finished my 9th grade. I was a straight A student because mom and dad always said, study hard, Ming. So I never had to be. But that made no difference. When I finished my 9th grade with a straight A, and I was looking forward to attending 10th grade and beyond, when the deportation order came down to me from the government. I got kicked out of school and I was never allowed to go back. And I was going to be sent away to labor camp for life. Not just me, 20 million others. Then I found out one way to escape this devastating fate of labor camp was to play a music instrument, in this case, a Chinese violin called erhu, or if I could dance, because if I could do that, I might be able to get into what they called communist song and dance propaganda troupe. If I could do that, I might be able to avoid being sent away to labor camps, being allowed to stay in the cities, because communist government still needed musicians and dancers in the cities. Then something happened. The communist government discovered my little scheme. They found out that I was playing a music instrument, learning dancing with an ulterior motive. Really not for music, dancing per se, but to avoid labor camp. They stopped my music dancing practice. You know, Representative Sparks earlier mentioned that I was playing this instrument, erhu. These days, very interesting. Lots of friends that say, oh, Ming, so nice. You have a hobby. You can play instrument. You can dance. Nice to have these hobbies. You know what I say? I didn't learn these as hobbies. I learned it to survive. So I tried everything. All failed. Music, dancing, or to avoid labor camp. All failed. My fate was labor camp. When I was about to be actually sent away, next slide, 1976, I got lucky. The communist dictator died. The dictator died. So all of a sudden, China woke up, realizing what a tragic mistake it has made by having a Cultural Revolution for 10 years, from 1966 to 1976, having shut down universities and colleges for their 10 years for the entire country, and having deported 20 million young people to the poorest part of the country. So they stopped the Cultural Revolution, they reopened all the colleges. And mom and dad came home one day, they said, Ming, you might be able to go back to school. I thought I'd never be able to hear that in my lifetime. I said, when? Mom said, maybe tomorrow. I said, wow, should I go back to 9th grade? Because 3 years ago, I was 14, I got kicked out of school after 9th grade. In the last 3 years, I've been out of school. I never studied 10th, 11th, 12th. I've been playing music, learning dancing, or to avoid labor camp. Now there's a chance to go back to school. Should I go back to 9th? Guess what my dad said? He said, no, higher. I said, 10th? He said, no, higher. I said, 11th? He said, no, higher. I said, wait a minute. You want to go back to school tomorrow, but you want me to jump 3 years ahead overnight into 12th grade, having never studied 10th, 11th, 12th. Dad said, yes. I said, you're crazy. Mom said, we're not crazy. She asked, how long did the communist government shut down colleges? I said, 10 years, from 1966 to 1976, during the Cultural Revolution. So she said, okay, now we're in 1976, all right. They did reopen all the colleges, all right. But is a guarantee they will not shut down college again next year for another 10 years. So I knew that mom's right. Either I try to go to college right now by jumping 3 years ahead overnight into 12th grades, or I may never be able to. So I knew I had to do it. So I got so stressed out. How could I do that? Jumping 3 years overnight. Mom and dad said, we're going to help you. So during daytime, they were working very hard. At night, they borrowed some old exams. But we were so poor as a family, the combined salaries of my parents, as I mentioned, every month was only $15. So we didn't have money to Xerox or anything like that. So what mom and dad did, they found little pieces of papers throughout the house using pencils, hand copied those questions onto little pieces of papers. And every night drilled me with little pieces of papers containing the questions. They made me study 19, 20, 21 hours a day. I almost killed myself studying. In my book, Autobiography from Darkness to Sight, it talked about when I finally made to the examination building on the day of the exam, I almost collapsed. I did barely get into college, all right, but I did not want to have anything to do with the dictators anymore. I've suffered enough. So next slide, 1982, with $50 borrowed from a visiting American professor with a student visa, I was dropped at National Airport, Washington, D.C. With that $50, with a Chinese English dictionary, knowing no one in this country, could hardly speak English, but with a big American dream. Next slide. I had the good fortune of attending some of the wonderful schools in this country since then, Next slide. But my work in the last 30 years serving my patients have been based upon the appreciation of freedom, appreciation of America. And next slide. These are the textbooks that I published over years in cataract and LASIK surgery fields. You know, the instrument I used to play during Cultural Revolution to escape a labor camp has truly become a hobby, the Chinese violin. But even dancing that I learned during Cultural Revolution at escape labor camp has become a hobby as well. Our foundation, when Representative Sparks introducing me, that we had a foundation to help blind orphan children see. With all the doctors, we donate our services. Once a year, our foundation have an event, a ball, a gala to raise money to help people see. So how would you call that ball? We call it the eyeball. Eyeball is a spectacularly beautiful event, but the point is that when you come to see the beautiful dancing, that reminds you how precious our sight is. Therefore, how much we need to help those who have lost sight. Next slide. So that's a synopsis of my biography from darkness to sight. You know, one of the things happened to me in the last few years as I got older, I became increasingly more appreciative of my parents, of what they have done in my most difficult years as a teenager in China during Cultural Revolution, when I had no freedom. So several years ago, as they were getting older in their late 70s, I moved both of them in to live with me for the rest of their lives. They took care of me as a teenager in my most difficult time. I wanted to take care of them in their sunset years. You know, as we debate in this context about COVID-19, previous slide, please, yeah, that COVID-19, I said there's two opposing views. One side view said that we should not open our country, you know, human life is more important, and the other side that we should, otherwise our economy will collapse. So the question is, what should we do? What I would say is, let's look at this question from a higher standpoint, from a bigger picture. And what is the most essential? What is the most important? What represents the essence of America? You know, I came from a situation with no freedom. I come to have found the freedom of America. I've come to realize that America, the essence of America is the freedom. I say our country is the best nation on this planet. You know, I give a commencement speech to university graduation, high school commencements every year, spring and fall, and before the pandemic. And I always talk about how precious the freedom is in America and how much we need to appreciate it. I came from a situation where I used to have no freedom. And one time a student asked me this question. He said, Dr. Wang, you always said America is the greatest country. Give me a proof. We got all these problems. America is bad this way. America is not good that way. Give me a proof why you always say America is the best country on this planet. And this is what I said. I said, I'll give you a proof that proves that America indisputably is the best country on this planet. And I said, have you heard about the immigration problem we have in America? That everybody from around the world wants to come here? Do we have a problem in America of immigration problem that start with E, that everybody wants to leave? We don't. Why everybody wants to come to live here in America? Because America provides something all human beings want: freedom, liberty, family, faith. That's why America is the best nation. So we all have the responsibility. We cannot just enjoy it, the freedom. We all have the responsibility to keep America strong. And what's the substance behind keeping America strong? You know, cannot be an empty statement. It has to have substance. And I would say the substance behind keeping America strong is how motivated our future generations of Americans are. You know, we all have kids, grandkids say, oh, I deserve this, I should have that. But we must motivate them. You know, that how can we motivate them? We all have that problem, right? I mean, we have Johnny, Nancy, you know, kind of take things for granted here in America. There's one way, perhaps, to motivate them, is to encourage Johnny or Nancy in America, a student here, to read, you know, real life story like this, to feel the pain and suffering of another youngster who at Johnny's age, at age 14, despite being a straight student, got kicked out of school and then was never allowed to go back. has to be sent away to labor camp for life and had to play music, learning dancing to avoid the labor camp. Came to this country with only $50, who could still make it. Johnny should be to make it. Don't be lazy. Get up in the morning, go to school, study hard, pull up your grades. Johnny should realize that he has the freedom in America to get an education. A freedom that was not available to me during Communist China, during Cultural Revolution, a freedom that is still not available in so much parts of the world, even today. So that's the reason I wrote this book, and to encourage young people to keep America strong by protecting the freedom. We have the freedom today in America. There's no guarantee it will still be there tomorrow, unless we and the future generations of Americans stand up, defend their freedom. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, my book is now being made into a major motion picture right now. It's called Sight. It will become available next year. The point of the book and the movie is to encourage our young people. So some of you may have seen the movie God's Not Dead. It's a great movie. The reason that it's a great movie is because it caught cute little Chinese student in that movie. That was me. That's why it's a great movie. No, just kidding. It's a great movie because it talk about the student escaping Chinese Cultural Revolution, came to this country, which inspired by my life story, this character. And then I realized that, then I became a Christian because a professor that actually opened a window in my life to show that life is not just about science, it's about science and the faith. But then today we are encountering some problems. I'm talking about the common ground between, open our nation or protecting the lives, right? But there's another type of common ground we should seek, that is the faith and science. And Alana, if you can advance many slides to the slide which talk about the faith and science conflict. So should we treat aging eye conditions? Next slide. We have heard the condition of macular degeneration, diabetes, glaucoma. What do they have in common? Is these are aging eye conditions. In order to treat them, you have to use young tissue. So the question is there a common ground between faith and science? I'm going to show you a little video about my 20-year journey. I've been struggling with this. On one hand, I would love to help my elderly patients improve in the eyesight by doing research on young tissues, but I didn't want to hurt the baby. So the question, should we or should we not use fetal tissue? Is there a common ground between faith and science? Let me show you this video now.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ming Wang, and I'm here to tell a story. And through the story, I want to ask one of life's greatest questions. Are faith and science friends or foes? In today's world, faith and science are often at odds with each other. For example, regarding stem cell and fetal wound healing research, faith dictates that we should leave the embryo and fetus alone and should not conduct such research. In contrast, science says we should. If we follow our faith and do not conduct such research, then how can we face the patients who are suffering from illnesses for which stem cell and fetal wound healing research may present the only hope for treatment? If we do conduct research on stem cell and fetus, how can we then have the peace with the thought of destroying the life of an embryo or a fetus? Are faith and science truly incompatible or at odds with each other? Which side would you choose? 16 years ago, we found ourselves faced with an agonizing situation of having to answer this question. We were conducting corneal wound healing research and found that in contrast to an adult eye which scars after injury, resulting in the loss of sight, a fetus can actually heal without scar. As an eye doctor, I really want to help my patients restore their sight. But I was also struggling with my moral conscience and faith. How can I take life away from an unborn child? We agonized over this dilemma, to the point that we were at our wits' end, and I nearly gave up on the whole fetal wound healing research project. There just seems to be no solution at all. I ask God. James 1:4 says, "Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete." I needed to know that it was going to be a long and arduous journey, that the right solution is often the most difficult one. We began looking at this problem from different angles and perspectives and stumbled upon the amniotic sac, a casing which holds the baby before the baby is born and is disposed of after the child is born. Is it possible the amniotic membrane may in fact contain the ingredient of scarless fetal wound healing process? Excited at this possibility, we began a series of experiments. Finally, after 16 years, we succeeded. Today, eye doctors throughout the world use the amniotic membrane contact lens to cover injured eyes, to reduce scar, and to restore sight. Amniotic membrane contact lens is a powerful example which shows that, in fact, faith and science can indeed work together. Through the study and use of amniotic membrane, we gained a better understanding of this scarless fetal wound healing process, which benefited adult eyes and helped restore sight. All these without touching any part of the unborn child. My name is Ming Wang, and I do believe that not only faith and science are compatible and can work together, but also it is through uniting them rather than splitting can we actually find a new, unexpected, and more powerful solutions to the problems in our lives.
So that's what we do now. We wait until after the baby is born. Then we ask the mother to donate the placenta, which is discarded anyway after baby is born. And we collect those placenta, bring it back to laboratory, bioengineer the placenta into placenta amniotic contact lens. Then put these useful healing placenta contact lenses on older patients' eyes. It's a way to do fetal research without hurting the baby. And since the discovery of this scientific discovery, now over 300,000 patients worldwide have their sight restored because of the amniotic membrane contact lens. Now, so therefore, I do believe between science and faith, there's a common ground. So let's return to the topic today. That is, do you think there's a common ground in this debate that should we open our nation to protect lives, to protect the economy, or should we not open our nation to protect the lives? You know, on the surface, there seems to be no common ground. But tomorrow in the Tennessean, I will be publishing a position paper. I'm going to propose a very clear and quite dramatic way to safely open our nation. I believe that we need to open our nation to save the economy, but there's a way to do safely. So this is an article that will come out tomorrow on the Tennessean that I believe there's a common ground between this dispute right now. So I'm going to show you one more video, then we're going to dive into discussing about the COVID-19 and exactly what I believe. That why do I say there's a way to safely open our nation right now? We need to open, but we can do it safely. So I'm going to show you one more video right now, which is the clip of the movie God's Not Dead, and one of the foundation-based patients now.
In its opening weekend, the movie God's Not Dead brought in an astounding $9.2 million, making it the 10th all-time highest box office Christian movie hit. And now, in its second straight week, it continues to smash expectations and has brought in an additional $9 million. And you may not know it, but this small budget film that's getting big national attention has a local connection. Take a look.
This semester, I propose that we refuse to waste our limited time together debating the existence of the big man in the sky. Fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words. God is dead.
I can't do what you want. I'm a Christian.
It's the story of a college student who defends God in front of his atheist professor and classmates. One of his peers he influences is a character inspired by the life of a local doctor.
The character Martin in the movie basically paralleled the life of my own. Pastor Rice actually texted me with a photo of Martin, and he said, okay, Ming, here's the guy who's going to play you. And I replied, I said, oh, at least he's better looking.
What happens in Martin's heart is something Dr. Wang remembers well.
So I grew up in China as atheist and during what they call Cultural Revolution. From 1966 to 1976, communist government decided the best way to govern is to destroy the future of all of these young people.
His fate was a lifetime of hard labor and poverty, but a chance meeting with an American professor changed everything.
In 1982, it was $50 borrowed from him, with enough money borrowed from relatives, that enough for one-way airfare, that I was dropped out National Airport, Washington, D.C. with that $50, with a Chinese English dictionary, but with a big American dream in my heart.
Ming worked hard and eventually was accepted into Harvard. There, a Christian professor took an opportunity to influence him.
He took me out for lunch, and he said, Ming, what's across the street? I said, that's a car. He said, what's the difference between car and human brain? I said, human brain is a lot more complicated. He said, okay, can you imagine a power of random piece of metal assemble itself into a car? I said, no way. He said, how about human brain? So right and then, he opened a window in my life.
Think of Jesus as my friend. You think Jesus is God.
I saw the truth and began opening myself to faith. And the same thing happened to Martin that opened himself. And there's some overlap of Joshua's character with me in the book as well. In the sense, the evidence that I talk about in the book, supporting the existence of God, these evidence, the words were put into the mouth of Joshua, and he was the one who actually voiced and present this evidence.
Dr. Wang says he finally figured out that science and faith work hand in hand.
Science is about what things are, and faith is about why things are.
Now, Dr. Wang's faith in Jesus Christ inspires everything he does. Just last year, he performed a miraculous surgery on a 15-year-old orphan from Moldova, Maria.
De la 7 ani am ajuns la școală și când am ajuns cu problemele de vedere, îmi părea că o să fie totul închis, nu o să am prieteni, dar totul s-a ales prin puterea lui Dumnezeu.
The summer of 2012, my husband and I were fortunate to be able to take our family, ourselves and our children, to Moldova. And our goal was to work at a summer camp for children that the majority of them are orphans. We walk into camp and all of a sudden there's this beautiful girl sitting there on a bench all by herself. She just looked so sad, so lonely, and her head was down and nobody was around her. And so I went up to her with the translator, and I said, hi, I introduced myself, and she told me that her name was Maria, but that's all, I could pretty much get out of her. She wouldn't look up at me, and I said, Maria, let me see your beautiful face. Let me see you. I want to see you. And she looked up at me. And it was then that I realized that she had something just terribly wrong with her eyesight. I could tell.
A year after eyeball 2012, that when we first heard about Maria came to the United States and walked into our One Vision 3D cataract and LASIK center. We sat down and I plotted out the whole sight restoration surgical plan, and involved 10 different steps. Each of the steps can have two possible outcomes, success or failure. And we can only get to the next step if the previous step is perfect or is successful. I know that that's a very small possibility for humans, but God is powerful. guess what? It happened. God created a miracle. The surgery went beautifully.
I see Maria. He's, oh, careful. You see Casey? Look at Casey.
Can you see me?
There's Maria. Look at her.
Well, God is good all the time. So in summary about this part is I think we should appreciate the freedom in America. And for someone like me who used to not have freedom, appreciate so much more. Oh, by the way, that once the church reopened, we're going to discuss about church opening in a moment also, that before the pandemic, every month I speak at churches on Sundays to talk about what I believe God wants science and faith to work together. So there is, I believe, a common ground between science and faith. So if you think your pastor might be interested, put your name in the chat room. I would love to come to your church after church is open, because most of these talks have attracted also young people, new people. Your pastor will like that. I can even send a book to your pastor as a gift. And these presentations has no cost. So either commencement speech or church presentation. Commencement speech about appreciating freedom in America, and church presentations about what I believe God wants science and faith to have the common ground. Regarding COVID-19, the question is, do we have that common ground, right? As I mentioned, it's a very tough question. I mean, we appreciate the freedom in America as the essence. So we don't want to, government take too much control out of our lives and dictate our lives. I mean, the Cultural Revolution story, as I relate to you, is an extreme form of government dictation. And that's not good. But at the same time, we have to think about the human lives. And there's no question that social distancing, masks, and these do help reduce the infection rate. And not only that, today I was communicating with several friends, and we're talking about a group of African-American pastors. Actually, they are involved in over like 3 million African-American congregation size, and many hundreds of these pastors. We're talking about what should we do? Because when the country reopened asymmetrically, meaning the minorities and immigrants and some of those lower socioeconomic income groups, they affect disproportionately more, and more mortality, mobility, more death rate in these groups if we open the country too quickly. So right now in the audience, there's a gentleman named John Michner, who is the COO of this organization that John and I run called Tennessee Immigrant and Minority Business Group, to help immigrant and minorities and to realize the American dream and to help America grow, become stronger for our country. So it's a tough question, especially realize that too early opening would disproportionately affect the elderly, the lower income groups, and the poor. So what should we do? The question is, is there a common ground here between opening, don't open, between life and the life and livelihood of our country, the economy? After seeing what's going on with the other countries, that because I have direct communication with many doctors across these countries, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Spain, Italy, China. So I have the direct information from these doctors who are in the front line of dealing with this outbreak and are 2 months ahead of us in this process. So they are dealing with second outbreak right now, right? So I'm trying to learn what actually works in this country that can prevent the second outbreak. And then what I come to realize is that they are doing one thing. one single thing really, really well. So what is that one thing? Which is incidentally is going to be the tomorrow, as I mentioned, the article to be published tomorrow in the Tennessean, which relate to the common ground. I do believe there's a common ground between left and right. There's a common ground between life and economy and jobs. There's a common ground between life and the livelihood of our country. So here's basically the proposal, which I'll be publishing this article, a very strong position. There's a position paper that I'm taking from medical perspective, because I really feel at the end of the day, it's a medical problem in this case. You know, we are opening the nation. So part of us says we should be opening to protect the economy and the jobs. I think we have to, otherwise economy will collapse. But at the same time, some others believe we should not be opening because it's going to bring the second and more deadly second wave. And rationale there is, think about it. If few dozen infected Americans in the early March in Seattle, Washington, could in 2 months, lead to over 1.5 million infected and over 90,000 deaths. In 2 months, it could do that, starting with only a few dozen in early March. Then you say, Dr. Wang, how many do we start now, number infected in America now? Are you ready? 17 million. There are many, many studies have done community testings, and they did some studies on the West Coast, East Coast, Stanford, and many other places, and it showed that the percentage of the US population today who are infected on average is about 5%. That's 17 million. Majority of the 17 million infected right now are asymptomatic. So here's the thing. As we reopen our nation, releasing the 17 million from their home confinement into the open society, think of what they would do. If few dozen can in 2 months lead to 1.5 million infected, what do you think if we start with a much bigger number now, as we reopen, start with 17 million? How many infections would that lead to? So that's the worry. So the question is there a way to reopen our nation safely? Yes. What I'm proposing is a voluntary national testing. Voluntary national testing. Because if we do that, we will be able to identify the 95% of us who are not infected right now. All of us can safely go back to work. Save the economy and the jobs, no problem at all, very safe. But we will know the 5% who are currently infected right now, and most of them have no symptoms, stay home for a few weeks. Then you say, well, such a testing, is it possible? How much are we testing? United States, right now, we have only tested 3% of our population. We are the least tested nation on this planet among industrialized countries. Almost every other industrialized countries have tested much more, higher percentage of population than us. So we're testing about 200,000 a day, United States. So in order to make this proposal work, voluntary national testing, you have to test something like 10 million a day. So then you say, Dr. Wang, is it possible? Yes. There are cities right now in the world, in those first wave countries, they are testing 1 to 2 million a day. So if a city in one of those countries can test 1 to 2 million a day, we as a nation can easily test 10 million a day. Then you say, because the testing is important, because without testing, to combat a pandemic, without testing, it's like boxing with your eyes blocked. You don't even know where the enemy is. So then you say, well, if we do, if it's so obvious, how come this proposal, voluntary national testing, has never been proposed? That's a good question. I believe the reason that we have not been so crystally realized this is a solution to protect the economy and the jobs and the lives is, I think people are so polarized that people are just busy criticizing each other that they forget to look at the merit of the issue, you know? And it's like the solution is actually right in front of you. You don't see it, just like a blind spot. So my point is that we have to focus on the issue. We have to overcome our differences, polarization, and find the common ground. And in this case, it's national testing. We have to learn how to listen to our opponents, how to see the things from others' perspective, and come together as a nation. Then you say, can we actually do it? Yes, I think we can. We're Americans. We thrive on innovating. We thrive on overcoming our obstacles. After all, we're a country that had put people on the moon 50 years ago. We can do it if we set our minds to do it. Then you say, Dr. Wang, voluntary testing, would that work? Would people go for it? Well, I got a great example. It did work. It's the annual flu shot. Most of us have no problem getting it's voluntary, but most of us getting those flu shots. But you have to make the testing as convenient and accessible as the flu shot. So basically, I feel that in this pandemic, when we're fighting with this polarization, right? Should we open the nation? Don't open the nation? Is the economy more important? Is the life more important? I think there's a solution. This is an opportunity for us to overcome our differences and look at the common ground. Is it possible to do both? To protect our economy, we reopen now. Yes, we do need to reopen to protect and also individual freedom, as I said, liberty, that's the most precious in America, especially for someone who used to not have freedom. But at the same time, we can protect human lives. I truly believe if we do this voluntary national testing, that we will be able to do both, protecting economy and protecting lives. We will be able to show we as Americans, when everything's on the line right now, because second wave could be coming, millions of Americans could be infected in the second wave. When everything's on the line now, life and economy, we as Americans can indeed overcome the difference and find the common ground at this critical time, turning this into our generation's finest hour. So that is what I feel that is so important for us to see the issues rather than having the polarization that just kind of defocus us. So that's what I'm going to be publishing tomorrow in Tennessean, the article about this proposal. Now, then you say, we're going to open up for questions now. You said, Dr. Wang, I'll start the question and maybe we'll invite Carl to talk about his perspective about protecting, because people like under Carl's, they're all the EMTs, they put in their lives on the ground. Sometimes we don't appreciate that. The doctors and nurses and putting their lives, we're all trying to avoid infection, but medical workers, we go where infection is. Want to hear his perspective, and Brenda will share her experience as well. But I would say, even if we cannot technically have the national testing, but we should, in each of us, our community, Rutherford County, in high-risk facilities, nursing homes, prisons, in high-risk professionals, doctors, nurses, pastors, supermarket attendees, restaurant servers, we should require testing. Because that's a way we can still allow us to have the freedom, liberty, that enjoy the freedom in America, come back to work, at the same time, identify that 5% who are infected, keep them at home. The 5% infected should not affect how the rest of us, 95%, live. So Alana, maybe we can open up a little question for either Representative Sparks or Carl or Brenda. Then I'll be happy to join in the question as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. So at this time, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, go ahead and put that in the Q&A or in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and do a question and answer with everyone. And Carl, I'm going to unmute you if you want to give your little take on COVID-19 from a medical perspective and what that looks from the front lines.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Dr. Ming Wang, I have to say I agree with you 100%. We do need to find common ground, and I really wish politics would stay out of the business of a pandemic, and would like some accurate media report. You know, articles I read just on the local news and stuff like that, the media really has an opportunity to give people hope and not instill fear. And because we can really have, you know, make this a positive thing and basically have the world coming together and working together, find our common ground, how to beat this. And this is beatable. As far as the economy, I think it's very important that we get it rolling up because I'm concerned with the suicide rate starting to pop up. We have people that's going to be losing everything they've invested their entire life in. And I do know that across the country that there is an increase in suicide. And I think in East Tennessee, from what I've been reading and talking with some other directors, they have had an increase in suicides. And I believe a lot of this is really preventable. As far as voluntary nationwide testing, I'm dead on with you on that. I wish there was a way that, you know, I could test my employees, and I know every one of them would want to do it. Test them in the morning before they get off, and test relieving shift that's coming in, and because they have families too. But that's my perspective on it. You're absolutely right. Common ground does need to be met, and it is doable. And I will say in Rutherford County, as far as everybody working together, it's we got to find old running machine in this county, and it's basically because everybody came together and had one goal in mind, and that was to deal with what we have, adapt to it, and we'll get through it and overcome it. And that's where I'm at on it. I'm very proud of our paramedics and EMTs at the ambulance service. They've taken it seriously, but they haven't let it rule their life. I mean, you know, we're even having to change the procedures on the way we treat some patients, but they're still getting the, you know, good medical treatment. But we have to protect ourselves so we can go to the next patient. And, you know, and the way we did that, we all came together and, you know, and made something that's a little scary into a positive situation. And that's the way you move forward on this. And as long as we do that, stick together, you know, this COVID-19 doesn't discriminate. Doesn't matter what race you are, don't matter where you're at in the world. So we need to come together on this. Just like Dr. Ming Wang said, there is common ground. And I believe the first thing we got to do is get the politics out of it. And let's cure this. And basically, the politicians can go back to fighting each other after this is over with. But right now, it's not the time. And this is America. We do adapt and overcome. And I'm extremely grateful to, you know, being an American. And I have friends who are from different parts of the world who hadn't had the opportunities I have. And I hate to see people not really understand what an opportunity there is in America. And freedom is precious and it's delicate. And it shouldn't be stripped from anybody. And it's not the government's job to dictate how you live. You know, their job is to protect this nation. And we can all come together as one nation and even come together across the world. That's what it's going to take to defeat this. And that's just my take on it.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Maybe Brenda
And-
can share her perspective.
Did you say Brenda, Dr. Wayne?
Hello, Brenda.
Yes, I just wanted to say, as a Christian, I'm reminded of what the Bible says in Isaiah chapter 58 and 11, where it says, the Lord will guide us always. And I believe that prayer, I heard all the different perspectives from the medical and the scientific, but I believe that prayer, number one, is going to be the first thing that we need to do in order to get our directives from God. But the Bible also says that faith without works is dead being alone. So in addition to our faith, there's a natural things that you all talked about that we must do in order to move past this. But I firmly believe that the word of God is true. And if we pray and that God will help us through this process and he will heal this land and he will direct us and this virus can be done away with. So I believe again that in addition to what you all saying, that we must pray and we must trust God through this process and trust the way that he's going to lead us out of this.
Yes, Brenda, I totally agree. I want to share with you all that in the last few weeks, I have spoken in a Zoom conference like this to 3,000 or 4,000 Chinese Christians in China. And, you know, here, sometimes we take for granted the freedom, right? We can go to church anytime, right? But those Chinese Christian friends, many of them have been persecuted. And most of these folks, they do not have a fixed location of the church because government shut it down. They have to move to somewhere else and keep on moving. But despite all their persecutions and all their difficulty, they're dying for the words of Christ. And that's why we have these testimony. I got together with them and they were very frustrated because government is suppressing the freedom. They're telling the truth, what's going on. And particularly people with Christian faith is being prosecuted. So I talk with them and like 3 Zooms, each of them are like 1,500 to 2,000 people and much bigger crowd in, you know, America here. And what I said is, yes, you know, people come from China, from United States, from other countries and different races, different colors, different ethnicity, but we all have in this crisis a common ground. That is, we are children of God.
Yes.
That I firmly believe that ultimately, you know, we as medical doctors, EMT, we do the best we can, of course, we cannot be lazy, but ultimately that who will decide the outcome at the end of the day is God. So this is the moment actually of humbleness for us as human beings. You know, sometimes we are so self-conceited, so to speak, you know, modern men and women with the science and technology, we think we can do everything. But it takes a little virus that brought us to knees, realize that we are all so vulnerable. And it takes that the crisis like this for us to be quiet ourselves, to listen, to hear God. You know, with less car driving, there's less pollution, right? In a way, it's like less pollution in our mind right now. We can see things a little bit clearer. And we can perhaps realize more that we need to ever so more important, listen to God, to derive strength from Christ, especially in a moment like this. What's unite the peoples of these different countries, especially the believers, is the belief in Christ Jesus. So that was my message in all 3 testimonials that I give to these several thousand Chinese Christians in the last few weeks.
Amen.
Alana, can you read any questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. So John asked, should voluntary testing be done from a state, county, or city level?
Great question. Great question, John. Really appreciate it. And John is the COO of Tennessee Immigrant Minority Business Group, which I co-founded 7 years ago. And he and I run this organization now to help immigrant minority businesses understand America, merge better into American society, and contribute to America. So this national voluntary testing idea that I'm formally proposing it tomorrow in Tennessean's article. It's a very drastic idea. I didn't invent it. I just kept on watching country like, Taiwan, who bigger than New York. Taiwan only has 7 deaths. In a country bigger than New York, only 7 deaths. As a doctor, I want to know why. And I saw a country like South Korea is one of the most successful countries in combating the coronavirus. And what they have in common is they realize that it's just like to control pandemic without testing is like fighting a boxing match with your eyes blocked. You don't know where your enemy is. And right now, United States only 3% tested. Only 3%. We are the least tested industrialized country. So if you say, Dr. Wang, what's the ideal situation when we open safely? Ideally is we open right now. We have to open, otherwise the economy will collapse. As Carl said, suicide rate will increase. And the other thing is we want to protect not just economy and jobs, but also freedom. So I think we got to open the country. There's no question. But ideally, medically, is majority population have already been tested right now, ideally, instead of just 3%. Then you say, Dr. Wang, how many are infected right now? As I said, 5% of US population, which is 17 million. Then you say, Dr. Wang, what's the difference? If the majority is tested already, what's the difference? Big difference. If you go to restaurant in May or June right now, since 5% of Americans are infected right now, based on all the studies have shown, or 17 million. Then you go to a restaurant, they say there are 40 people walking in the restaurant. Statistically, 2 of them among the waiter and waitresses are infected, 5%. So here's the problem. This waiter waitress is walking around and serving everybody plates, interacting with hundreds of people a day. Will you feel comfortable eating off the plate they're handed by this waiter, waitress? This is just not just restaurant or public space. Then you say, Dr. Wang, if majority is being tested quickly in a few weeks, does it make a fundamental difference? Absolutely. Because if a majority tested, out of that 40 waiter, say majority have been tested, we already identified the 2 who are infected right now. They are not in the restaurant today. They are staying at home. Only the rest 38 are working. That's the fundamental difference. I think it's not fair to our country. It's not fair to our economy. It's not fair to our jobs that all locked down, only 5% are infected. The 95% our livelihood should not be affected by that few percent who are infected. So that's the way you can tell from testing. Now, speed of testing addressed, technologies now, and there's even new tests coming out, much more comfortable than the nasal swab. It's a saliva test. I think most of us probably wouldn't care, give a little, spit a little saliva tested, the rapid testing. So I think the burden is not significant to the individual, and testing speed technology is here. And so John's question is, should we instigate nationwide, statewide, citywide, countywide, voluntary national testing? I wish President Trump would listen to me right now. I would like to have a chance to talk to him. So that's the only way to get national policy. I hope that the governors will have a chance to listen to me as a doctor, with this common sort of ground approach and learning from other countries 2 months ahead of us, voluntary national testing. But lots of us, we don't necessarily have the opportunity. Maybe Representative Sparks have, he says poor in our state, maybe Rutherford County on a county basis, maybe Mayor Catron, for leaders like that can hear this point of view. And I think at least in our own community, we can do limited scale, as much as we can control within our domain of control, that try to go towards that voluntary testing direction. You heard Carl said, he has EMT working. It's not just risking their own lives. They go where infected people are. As rest of the major public, we go away from where infected people are. Doctors, nurses, doctors and myself, I go to where people are sick. That's the definition of my profession. So it's not just myself, it's also my staff, but also my own family when I go home. If I have to put it to saliva 5 minutes test, I would like to know if I'm still free of the infection. So to answer your question, John, is first, we need to recognize this is the common ground. This is the way for us to do both. Open our nation now and protect lives, particularly the slower socioeconomic class, disproportionately suffering more death, the weak, the elderly. So that's the common ground. We can do it if we set our mind to do it. In terms of your question, at what scale, at what level, it just have to be able to see what we can control, each of us. You know, maybe within Carl's EMT division, maybe in my hospital clinic, you know, whatever we can control. But the public education is the first. It's the understanding that there is a safe way to reopen our nation now that can protect lives and protect the economy.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Okay, I'm gonna unmute Carl too. So I'm gonna just start asking questions, and you guys can answer them as you see fit. So if anyone wants to answer, feel free to jump in. Someone said, so Dean said, I agree with Dr. Wang wholeheartedly that broad testing is the answer to reopening safely, given that we have 330 million people in the US, though to reach 90% once we require nearly 300 million testing. Does the laboratory capacity exit to process that many tests? Or what would it take for us to get there?
Great question. I will answer that, and Carl and Brenda, if you maybe that you can share your perspective. Vaccine and treatment are still very slowly being developed against COVID-19. We still have no good treatment, and vaccine is still probably at least a year away. But in contrast to vaccine and the treatment, the test has been well established. There are two kinds of tests: the saliva, the nasal swab, and soon to be replaced by saliva. That's virus test. And there's a fingertip, the blood, the antibody test. The testing I'm talking about today is the major test, the diagnostic virus test. I'm not talking about the blood antibody test. So the virus test right now, there's an excellent question. How fast are we doing now? 200,000 a day right now in the United States. 200,000 a day. How fast can humanly possible? There are cities around the world right now are testing 1 to 2 million a day. Because especially with saliva, you can very quickly spit and quickly testing. So I believe if other countries, a city, can test 1 to 2 million a day, we as a nation should be easily test 10 million a day. So if you do 10 million a day, it will take 1 month. 1 month to finish testing. But after that month, our life will dramatically be different, because actually majority have been tested. 95% of us will not be hindered by this 5%. We still can enjoy our life. You can be able to walk in the restaurant. You feel comfortable because all these waiters has been tested. Whoever tests positive are not in that restaurant night. You can feel comfortable to ride an airplane because you know all these the people who work in airplane, they are all been tested, or work in the hospital for that matter, or supermarket. You know, supermarket is another, and going to church. You know that pastor could be potentially a super infector. So the answer to your question is technology of testing, in contrast to treatment and vaccine, which is not being developed yet. Testing technology has well established right now, and countries are doing per city, 1 to 2 million a day. So we as a nation should be easily do 10 million a day, which will take us a few weeks to finish the country. Carl, Brenda, do you have anything to share along the testing?
This Carl, I've been trying to get as much information I can about the saliva test, and I believe in Georgia, state of Georgia, that's what they're doing. I'm still trying to learn myself about it, the accuracy of it, and how long it takes to get a result and stuff like that. If you know anything about it, I'd appreciate some information on that. I'd like to pass it on to our health department and others. And is it something that I can even put on an ambulance? And test our patients right then and test ourselves, every morning. And because, we don't want to spread it either. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Brenda?
Well, I was listening to what Carl was saying, and I was in agreement with that. And I was just going to listen to what you said, your response to the question he just asked.
And then also, Melissa, if you want to respond to, or anyone else on the Zoom, you guys are more than welcome to. Mike.
I want to quickly comment what Carl just mentioned. Carl, that there are a few issues about testing. One is cost. The cost of those tests can be brought down to a few dollars. And inconvenience, with saliva tests available, it's very quick. And my best example is a national voluntary testing can work because just like flu shot, majority of people in the fall gets flu shot. You have to make convenient, accessible though. You have to bring those flu shots to the companies, lunch hour. But those are small costs compared with the tremendous cost of a second and even more deadly second wave. The human cost, the job cost, the economy cost, and human life cost and medical cost. This few dollar test, it's nothing. But the point I'm trying to make today is in a very polarized society, sometimes polarization gives people power, but it's stagnant in the society. The depolarization brings people together, allow you to identify the true issue, move the society forward. Actually, I co-founded recently a 501c nonprofit organization called the Common Ground Network, because I've been committed all my life to help people find the common ground. I believe that's how society can, so I'm using that nonprofit organization to help people find the common ground in their lives so they can be happier and more fulfilled. Alana, can you read more questions?
Yeah, sure. So Stephen said, what would you suggest churches can do to help out during the pandemic?
It's so important, especially in Bible Belt. Sorry, I'm keep on jumping straight in. Brenda, I'll ask Brenda to share your perspective, then I'll comment.
Well, I think one of the things that we can do is connect with those services that help the homeless population. I've been talking to a lot of pastors and a lot of leaders in the church community. And one thing that I found out as I was doing that in relationship to people who work with the homeless, is there's just a big need for volunteers or support services for people who are homeless, especially those that are dealing with mental health issues. And I think the church can be really helpful in terms of reaching out to the elderly, to the widows, to the homeless population. And that's one way that we can dive in and help. Because again, like I said, faith without works is dead being alone. Not only should we have faith that God's going to move and deal with this situation, but we also have to help others during that time. Actually, I think it's one of the greatest times for the church, an opportunity for us to really show how strong we are at this time and to help others overcome, and especially deal with the issue of mental illness and homelessness. So I think it's a good idea for us to get involved in those two areas.
I totally agree with you, Brenda, that I think what you just said, I could not agree with you more, is church, especially in Nashville, Middle Tennessee, has an unprecedented opportunity to demonstrate leadership in a public health crisis. Because traditional wisdom is church is very highly density, enclosed space, frequent human interaction. So people expect church to be the brewing ground for a high rate of infection. But we can use our knowledge about how this disease transmitted. We can use common sense approach such as testing for high-risk individuals. I think pastors should be tested because pastor is potentially could be a super transmitter. In South Korea, one of the highest incidence of infection was one church, one Sunday service, 2 hours, hundreds got infected because their pastor was infected. However, so what I'm trying to say is there's an opportunity for church and the pastors to get together to learn this medical information, learn the measures that do work in terms of preventing second outbreak, proactively testing the high-risk professionals such as pastors. Then church can become a great example that we still allow us in a service, including in-person service, allow us worshiping God, but setting as a model system for the rest of the country that if a church with all its inherent risk can demonstrate low rate of infection is in the second outbreak by adhering the medical measures, by willing to look at common grounds, overcome the polarization, then church has an amazing opportunity to demonstrate an example. And the difference is church, we worship God. That's God's power. So I think there's no better opportunity right now to truly demonstrate God's power by church leading the way of reducing second wave in this environment where everybody expects church will have high rate of infection due to population density.
And then this is a very interesting question I got. It's from an anonymous attendee. They asked, I don't believe more than 10% of Americans would voluntarily take a COVID-19 test. We are very stubborn. Is there another avenue Americans can take that you believe more than 10% of Americans would indulge? I thought that was fascinating.
What do you say at the end?
So is there another way that you can get around the testing that 10% of Americans would actually do? Because they believe that Americans are very stubborn and not everybody's going to take the test.
My best example is voluntary testing is like flu shot. Flu shot every year in the fall, significant portion of Americans voluntarily get flu shot. Flu shots in many places you have to pay. And it's actually a needle injection, that's a little pain. But virus testing, if now evolved into very quickly replaced by saliva testing, is painless. So you have to make it convenient, accessible to Americans. You have to bring the testing to the place of work, lunch hour. And at the end of the day, I think we all, as Americans, we are smart. We all have common sense because we know the second wave will come. Why do I know that? Because second wave in all these first wave countries, they are battling second wave right now, 2 months ahead of us. So second wave will come in August, September, or winter time. Second wave is likely to be worse because we start with a bigger number infected right now compared with early March in the United States, a few dozen. So when Americans are getting information, get the education, I think we will do it because we understand, we are smart. And we have demonstrated to be a people that once we set our mind to it, we'll do it. Like, as I said, we landed people on the moon 50 years ago. It's an unprecedented opportunity for Americans to demonstrate that we can protect the economy by opening right now, by protecting the life, by testing, voluntary testing, so that we can show we can overcome the difference to find a common ground. It's amazing, as I said, it could turn into our generation's finest hour.
And then, thank you, Dr. Wang. Matt asked, how often shall I get a test? You may get infected by the virus the next day, even if you get tested negative today. And then he also wants to know where you can get the testing.
Those tests has to be tested frequently. In those first wave countries, all my information comes from these countries 2 months ahead of us. So they are testing every 2 weeks or every month because then you say, what's the point? That they keep on testing? No, it's not keep on growing problem. It's a keep on diminishing problem. The reason is, if we go one round of testing, we identify 5% infected. We keep them at home. So 95% of us enjoy our freedom, enjoy our work, jobs, economy, right? But then second cycle, let's say a month or two later, then we have much less percentage of population are infected. It's no longer going to be 5%, could be 1%. You know, it's a process to keep on hitting the target will very quickly reduce the percentage of the population being infected. The reason is, you know who these people should be staying home. So even though it won't be repeated, a month or 2 or 3 months later, it's not going to repeat forever because the number of infected will keep on dwindling.
And then Zane said, what about visiting family outside of your home unit, but not in large groups? Is that safe?
Very, very important. For example, church. When we open for in-person service, probably state of Tennessee, maybe June, then we have to be careful that you have to stay 6 feet apart. But you don't have to stay 6 feet from your family members. You're at home together anyway. But you have to stay 6 feet apart from other families. So if you're visiting another family, it's the same rationale apply. And generally speaking, that our behavior has to be monitored by the real-time viral density. That's the number of viruses in the air, on the surfaces in Middle Tennessee today, which is different from yesterday, which is different from New York. The viral density changes every day in outbreak. Then you say, Dr. Wang, how can we know the viral density? It's the number of new infection in the last 24 hours in Middle Tennessee. The higher the number, the higher the density. So that means what? That means when we go out in this outbreak, as we reopen, we have to look not just the weather to decide how much clothes we need to wear. We have to look at another parameter called viral density of the day to decide. You may have planned to have a meeting tonight, but the viral density today is high. You may cancel that scheduled meeting tonight, etc. So our life has to be gauged, fluctuating, depends on the viral density until next year sometime when we have the vaccine. But what I'm suggesting today, though, with the article in Tennessee tomorrow is until the vaccine, we do have an established technology to rapidly test our saliva or nasal swab. So therefore, we can identify as many as we can. We're not going to be able to test the whole country, but even half the country, 25% country is better than the current only 3% tested so far.
And then does anyone on the panel have any questions for Dr. Wang? I think Representative Sparks.
If I could, I'll often talk about Dr. Carl Jung. Have you ever studied Dr. Carl? I guess you pronounce it Jung, like J-U-N-G. And a quote by Einstein that says, coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. While I'm listening to you, I'm also taking a class here, a writing course in TSU. You know what my professor is talking about right now? Surgery you done, Dr. Wang. That's part of his lecture while I'm listening to you. That's part of his program right now. That's pretty weird. I mean, it's so coincidental, but I call that synchronicity, kind of like a confirmation, if you will. And then he told me to take a I was sitting listening to him while I'm doing that because I missed a Zoom call last night. But I wanted to ask Dr. Wang, I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic of governments. I'll be honest with you, as a state lawmaker, I don't trust governments. I'll just tell you straight up. I get disappointed with the church today. The church is silent on many issues. Many issues are silent. I see problems in the community, and the church is silent today. It's deafening, it's so silent. But I'm looking at the numbers here, 273 deaths out of 6.8 million people. It just seems like we went to extreme measures for something that's so minute. I mean, just so tiny. And I see businesses shut down. I see liquor stores open, wide open. I see Lowe's open, Home Depot open, crowds at Home Depot, and churches shut down. I see Channel 5. Journalists talking about to the vice mayor of Nashville, saying, "Can you get pulled over and get a ticket for driving down the road?" And the vice mayor of Nashville says, "No, not yet." And then he says, "It was forgot that guy, Nick Barrett." Nick Barrett says something about these churches shouldn't open; they need to be shut down. And I'm seeing this in the Bible buckle, and I see journalists say it, and it gets me alarmed. I know I'm not part of a minute minority. I think I represent a solid majority. As Christians, we try to be nice, we try to play nice with everybody, kumbaya. In the meantime, I see in the world going to hell in a handbasket. We had to shut down our business. My wife was crying about it. She told me she wanted me to protest at the Capitol, wanted me to call Governor Bill Lee. I thought, well, do I call Governor Bill Lee? What do I do? Well, I was going to call Governor Bill Lee, and I was going to go with her to the protest, and then he changed the opening date on the hair salon, the barbershop. You know, she was really upset. She's got 6, 7 girls that work with her. But when I have these fears as a state lawmaker and as a Christian, what do you say to that? Because I try to play by the rules. I want to listen to the governor. Well, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't wear a mask. And I do think that there's going to be a time, whether it's next week or next month, that I'm going to be shamed because I didn't wear a mask at Home Depot. What do you say to my fears?
Great question, Mike. A great question. As I mentioned, using my China Cultural Revolution story today, I'm someone who feels so strongly about the essence of America, which is the freedom, that I used to not have freedom and appreciate at an even deeper level than average Americans. So to me, the risk of government overstepping the boundary and utilizing whatever excuse, this could be, medicine could be used as an excuse to take the freedom away from our citizens. Their risk is definitely there. Yeah. And at the same time, as sort of the common ground guys, which is I've been this way all my life, and I'm also looking at the other side today. Mike, you talk about church being silent, which I totally agree, that is the case. And today, for example, I'm working on a document, as I mentioned early before this presentation, with several dozen African-American pastor leaders. And they control the church congregation size of like 3 million. And they're trying to figure out some kind of recommendation and what their congregation should do, because that's a population with inordinate number, high mortality rate, and more death affects the poor more in terms of COVID-19. So in that case, they're trying to figure. They asked me today. They said, Dr. Wang, should we just stay home? You know, just kind of like fight the other side. So my answer to them, and also my answer to you, Mike, is this. I think blanket statement is wrong. When somebody make a blanket statement, you have to be suspicious. This entity is trying to control us, right? Because nothing's blanket. Has to be scientific based with information. My best answer is it has to be location specific, it's time specific, and it's viral density specific. Meaning, Middle Tennessee, depending on our viral density of today, may be implementing different type of balance of closing, open than, you know, another part of Tennessee, right? Because it's at the end of this human life and the jobs. It's human lives and the job hang the balance, both. So what I'm recommending is all blanket statement, either complete close or complete open, I think it's all wrong. Because these are statements made most likely with political motivation, not based on medicine. The medicine should be every location, every county, we should recognize this virus float in the air, in aerosol, stay on the surface 3 to 8 hours, that the viral density fluctuates every day. And we should gauge the activity of this community based on viral density of this week or next week, which is different from last week of the same location, and is different from another location altogether. So to answer your question, Mike, is that the risk is definitely there. Certain part of our society is using medicine as a way to exert its government control. We have to be mindful of that, particularly America is representing freedom. It's a beacon of freedom for the world. But at the same time, we also have to recognize on the other side that too aggressive opening will disproportionately affect or kill more the poor and elderly. So how we balance that? My answer is science. Don't have a blanket statement. we should have to judge by each location at each time segment, gauged by the viral density in the air and on the surface, which is very simple. It's just the number of new infection in the last 24 hours in that location.
Lon, can you hear me? I just want to say, look at my screen, what they're talking about. They literally, that's his lecture tonight, is one of your stories of giving vision to a blind man. Now, if that ain't some spiritual confirmation, I don't know what it is. I don't think you got to be Pentecostal to be a believer that the Lord got this. I may not do good in my class because I'm missing a lot of this right here, but I do trust you, Dr. Wang, and you know, but the fear is out there. I'm seeing, I call it Orwellian. And people don't like to speak up. Even one of my instructors at MTSU taught, Larry Burris, knows the First Amendment in and out, probably knows more than anybody in the state of Tennessee on this. And I just have a lot of fear. I see the media. I don't trust the media. I watch Australian news. I watch BBC. I watch other news sources because I don't trust our own news sources. I know I'm not alone with that at all. The Tennessean, I don't trust them. Cadet, I've watched fake news. We've got a lawmaker in minorities earlier, John DeBerry, down in Memphis right now. And I'm not trying to be political. I'm just being honest with you. Christian, he's facing religious persecution right now. The Democratic Executive Committee took his name off the ballot. The media's not going to talk about this. He's one lawmaker who marched with Dr. King as a little boy. He's a voice for people, yet they silence his voice. So when I don't see a pastor talking about this in my community or across this great state, they're silent. These things are happening. I get concerned, and the church is just silent on this. But like Pastor Brenda said, and by the way, her church is the one that burnt down, by the way. Not one Bible was destroyed, am I right? Nope. Or one Bible, not one cross was destroyed. Did you think she had many people in this community come to her side? No, she really didn't. She may not like me saying that, but I'm just being honest.
I think the important thing.
We should be standing up for those that are downtrodden, that suffer religious persecution. Those Christians in China, a Christian in Memphis, John DeBerry, they took his name off the ballot. I was on a conference call with him 2 weeks ago. He started crying. A 66-year-old man who's seen the hurts in Memphis, inner city Memphis, and they take his name off the ballot. Talk about voter suppression. You don't get no better than that, or worse than that. And CNN's silent, Fox News is silent, the church is silent today, and I'm seeing these things. I call it Orwellian. And if anybody wants to debate me, not here, but wherever, the media, Nick Barris, Gannett, I'll debate all of them because I got some that don't have, and that's truth. It's truth. It's like you, Dr. Ming Wang. You got truth on your side because you suffered persecution. You came from nothing. And that's why you appreciate the freedoms that you have here. We appreciate those freedoms. We take them for granted, like you said. I don't mean to get on a rant, but it just upsets me when I see so much silence today and cowardness. It seems like we got a society of cowards today. We do have some good elected officials here that are here, but a lot of people are silent today.
Can I say something real quickly here, Dr. Wayne? I just wanted to say basically, I think we're all in here probably over 40 or 50. And one thing that I can say about life, things are not always the way they seem. And I think all the way from Genesis to Revelation, we can all say as Christians, that is that God always shows up at the right time and he is never late. And even though it may appear that the church is silent, from what I can see, not just in the natural realm, but also in the spiritual realm, as people are praying that the church is rising up. And I think that we're going to see a new church rising up after all of this. And so, you know, I think the important thing to remember is that look at God's track record with his people. He has never forsaken his people, and he's not going to forsake his people now. And as long as we continue to pray and to do what he tells us to do, change is going to happen. And I truly believe that you're going to see the church rise up in the midst of all of this.
Yes, yes, yes. You know, sometimes I got questions. People ask, you know, why, Dr. Wang, you're so passionate about the common ground? Why so passionate? You want to bring people together, solve problems. And that came from just coming from another country. You know, when I arrived here, you know, some 1982, poor student with $50, I escaped Cultural Revolution. And one of the things that I heard right after I landed in this country that stuck to my memory to this day was the saying, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. That was the America that I fell in love with. That's what's best America. It's about freedom and the mutual respect. In many ways, though, I've seen America in the last few decades are going away from that. We're increasing, become more and more polarized, divided society. And we no longer care about the merit of issue, but just the power alliances. And Mike, I agree with you. Media is just as guilty because their polarization is they just want to glue us to the TV set so that they can raise their Nielsen rating.
Yes, amen.
So we have to see through all that polarization. We have to see through that at the end of the day, that for nation to progress, we have to overcome the polarization. Yes, polarization do give people power, but we have to resist that. We have to bring people together. Only depolarization, bring people together, can move the society forward. That's why I'm so passionate with my nonprofit Common Ground Network, because that's why it's my lifetime passion. As an immigrant, as a minority, as someone who truly appreciates the essence of America, which is the freedom. It's priceless.
And we're gonna wrap up with one more question from the panel. Does anyone on the panel have another question for Dr. Wang?
How would you recommend, Dr. Wang, how would you recommend city leaders and state leaders to start a conversation about how we can facilitate testing? And I think what we need is information. Where would we get the supplies, the testing supplies? How involved does the city need to be or the state need to be in order to facilitate that conversation? Because we are not medical specialists in most cases.
Yeah, great question, Melissa. Great question. Any major public health policy has to start with education. And right now, because the polarization, the media is just as guilty, that there's so much information in the airwaves, but paradoxically, if you ask average citizen, what I just simply outlined, this simple rationale of voluntary testing, most people don't understand. And I'm not smarter, I just happen to be more willing to kind of keep on watching other countries who are 2 months ahead of us, learn these things, and we should do it here. And so we have to start with education. That means if you know any organization, MTSU, your alma mater, or any other school, company, Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, which are interested in getting information, educate its members about the importance of this common ground, which is a voluntary testing that can save the economy and save the jobs. And it's a little inconvenience, but as I said, we are much better than that as a people, right? We see the big picture. We don't want the second or even more deadly wave. So start with education. That means more session like today. And I'll be happy to, anyone, panelists, anyone, any organization, including your group, Carl, the EMT folks, that I'll be happy to do a Zoom that everybody get the understanding about why volunteer testing is so important, because we're sitting in the background, we're opening a nation where only 3% so far has been tested. That's very, very risky, okay? We're sitting in a situation where the poor, the lower downtrodden, the lower socioeconomic class folks are disproportionately get more affected, more death rate. So that I think to answer your question, the key is education. If majority of our population, say Rutherford County, people get hang of it and read about, okay, this comes from a doctor who doesn't have any other agenda other than medicine. That's how I'm devoting my life for, is medicine. That's my agenda, no other agenda. So that makes sense because those are proven measures. They're proven in other countries 2 months ahead of us who all are combating second wave right now. So more public education by being for me to speak to more and more group like this, churches, Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, then more people realize, and the facilities is become available now, public free testing, and we can encourage our local government, local leaders to make testing even more readily available. The key is you got to be like common flu shot. It has to be convenient and accessible. People don't have to leave their place of work. They just go to third floor in their building over lunch hour, get tested. If so many people will voluntarily go tested for the flu shot, which is a stick, I think a lot more people will be willing to go through a saliva test, you know? So the key is education or lack of, because of polarization, such essential information as I presented today. The way to save economy and lives is voluntary testing. That message is lost in this airwaves. That message is not being clearly presented by our leaders, and the message is not connecting to our general public.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. And if anyone else has any questions for Dr. Wang about COVID-19, or if you would like to have him speak at your church, club, or organization, I put my email, alana@wangvisioninstitute.com in the chat box, and you can send me an email. I'd be happy to set that up for you. And then also Carl mentioned that you can give him a call if you have any questions about the front line as well. So I went ahead and put his cell phone number in the chat box too.
If anybody interested in book, you can put it there. I will send the book mailed to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for organizing this. Thank you, Carl, Brenda, everybody.
Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And
Thank
Alana, put my
you.
email address there so anybody can follow up with questions. They can email me directly.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless everyone. Be safe.
Good, thanks.
Thank
One
you.
of the things that we could do with the people on the front line